Okay, pending where you are, good afternoon or good morning, and welcome to today's webinar. Plan more, react less, building and expanding your plan maintenance program. It's going to feature Paul Armas of Brown University and Steve Maruszewski of Penn State University. My name is Kevin Will. I'm an account manager at Sightlines and will be moderating the session today as Paul and Steve share their PM strategies, plans, and cultures that they're implementing at their respective institutions. To begin, I wanted to both formally thank and introduce both of our speakers. So Paul, he's been with Brown University for 6 years and currently serves as the Director of Maintenance Operations. He's most proud of the culture of continuous improvement that he has cultivated throughout his tenure in conjunction with the increased effectiveness of service initiatives through the alignment of facilities operations with capital renewal investments. Steve has been with Penn State University for 20 years and is currently serving as the Associate Vice President for Physical Plant. In addition to leading a physical plant staff of incredibly talented individuals, Steve's proudest accomplishment at Penn State is achieving a national award for sustainability in higher education through their Sustainability Strategic Plan. We wanted to quickly review today's agenda. First, we're going to give you an overview of Sightlines and our database. Paul will then share Brown's PM implementation strategy, as well as the anticipated outcomes. Following Paul, we'll turn the microphone over to Steve, and he'll be discussing Penn State's PM strategy, which is centered on reliability. I'll then briefly share executive takeaways, and that'll lead us to the Q&A component of today's webinar, and then that'll be our wrap-up. So with the Q&A in mind, we want you to please feel free to, start a dialogue, enter in your questions. Any questions or comments for Paul or Steve, please don't hesitate to share those. We want this to be an interactive session and look forward to answering all of those questions towards the end of the session. So we'll be monitoring them throughout the presentation and do our best to get to all of them. So if you want to submit a question or a comment, you can simply enter it into the question box of your GoToWebinar window pane, and then that'll get sent directly to us. To answer one question up front that we typically receive, following today's session, each of you will receive an email that contains links to both the presentation slides and webinar recording for your continued review, engagement of the material. So please keep an eye out for that email tomorrow. So before we officially turn the session over to Paul to begin to share Brown's PM execution strategy, I wanted to provide a quick review of where all of our data and insights come from. So where does it originate? We have an international client base in the United States and Canada that includes more than 325 ROPA Plus members. You can see the breakdown on the screen of our membership, that it includes flagships, publics, privates, state systems, and campuses both large and small across North America. The growth of this national thought leadership and the impact that we're having on campuses. Some key metrics that demonstrate the depth of our ROPA Plus database is that it currently consists of 1 billion square feet of space, over 15 billion in capital and operating budgets, plus operating metrics on roughly 40,000 buildings and 50,000 staff members. Over the past 2 years, we've added over 100 new campuses to our membership and database, so the facilities intelligence tools that we're providing are continuing to become more and more powerful. The tools that we offer are rigorously designed to help drive a new facilities conversation on our members' campuses and lead to an alignment of strategies across both the institution that connects the dots between space, capital, and operating policies. One of these interrelated strategies includes a culture of proactive plan maintenance to ensure that your building systems reach their full life cycle. You're going to hear a lot about this from both Paul and Steve. Operating policies can be combined with capital allocation strategies to mitigate long-term risk by preventing failures. This will in turn lower operating costs and increase the service that is provided to the campus constituents. At Sightlines, we firmly believe that making real change on campus requires developing clearly defined policies around these areas and throughout our ROPA Plus model. We've been able to help our members unite facilities operations and capital investment with institutional mission, utilize predictive analytics, and ultimately tell each campus's facility story as effectively as possible. And with that, I'll wrap up here and pass it off to Paul to get started. So Paul, please begin when you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So before I just start into some of the profiles of Brown, I just wanted to say a couple of things. We've been on this journey here at Brown for really five plus years in not only developing our preventive maintenance strategy, but also how important it's been in changing our culture and having really a proactive workforce in our department. So one of the biggest takeaways I just want to share with the audience is that this has really been a PM strategy developed by a collaboration of frontline staff sharing their ideas with management and really working together to change behaviors to not only frontline staff behaviors but management changes in behaviors to improve our effectiveness both in terms of how we maintain equipment and how we deliver those daily services. So you'll hear me talk about preventative maintenance. When you hear me talking about PM, I'm really referring to all different types of maintenance, planned maintenance. So we not only do preventative maintenance, but we also do building inspections, rounds, predictive maintenance, and corrective maintenance as a result of preventative maintenance that we find as we're working on pieces of equipment and systems. We are moving toward reliability-centered maintenance, but like I said, we're really 4 years into at least what we've defined as a 7-year journey to get where we'd like to go. So in terms of Brown itself, we're a small Ivy League institution. We've got approximately 9,100 undergraduate and graduate students, faculty and staff of about 4,500 here at Brown, spread over 6.8 million gross square feet in 236 buildings. We're in Providence, so it is an urban setting. It's a small city, so we're primarily on what's called College Hill, but we have a second campus that's growing in our downtown area in what's called the Jewelry District. So we have the gamut of construction, just like most universities. Ours date back to 1772, new buildings as new as last fall. If you were to break down our campus, we're really broken down into 8 distinct building portfolios. So the first 3 building portfolios you see there on the slide make up 50% of the 6.8 million gross square feet and number about 85 buildings. The next portfolio down, the dormitories make up 50 buildings and 25% of the campus, and then the last 25% of the campus, or 100 plus buildings, make up the last 4 portfolios you see there. In terms of our staff, we are a collective bargaining unit. We run 24/7. We are centralized out of one location, which means everyone leaves, deploys, and comes back at the end of the day. Because we're a maintenance team, we are, like most maintenance teams out there, we've got the whole spectrum of skills licensed to semi-skilled employees, and we are work order and task driven. So some Sightlines database you'll see here is we have a much older campus as compared to our peers, and we've been doing a heavy amount of infrastructure improvement, but it's really been, up until recently, it's really been in space improvements. We've got a lot of work ahead of us in terms of building systems, and this was a driver in early on back in 2010, 2011, when we started talking about developing a preventive maintenance strategy. In terms of our daily services and frontline staff, we do have more staff, a higher number of staff than compared to our peers. We have about 56,000 square feet per FTE. Our daily services on average is about $1 less compared to our peers, and our PM, which is the red bar sandwich in between the yellow and the blue there, has grown to 69 cents per gross square feet to where we were at the beginning of this journey, which was slightly less than 23 cents gross square foot. So back in 2010, we had Sightlines come in, and they had done a facility assessment for us, and at that time we had a NAV, net asset value, of our overall campus buildings of about 82%, which was 82% to the new or good. That was kind of the good news. The bad news is we had a deferred maintenance backlog at that time, back in 2010, of $462 million, and that backlog would continue to grow if we weren't investing a significant amount of money, and just to keep pace, to keep that bucket from filling, we would need $60 million annually. At that time, we were getting $5 million of capital renewal, so clearly not enough money to keep pace from keeping that bucket from overflowing. But more alarming was we weren't doing a good job with any type of focus on planned or preventative maintenance. So it really got us thinking about what we needed to do from the different silos and the different working groups within the operations. So we decided to create an RFP. We actually identified 2 consulting firms that would help us with coming up with a preventative maintenance strategy. The first company was an engineering-focused company that helped us basically model and come up with the different types of systems we would do PM on. And then we also hired a lean consulting group that would focus on identifying waste and inefficiencies in our processes and help us reinvest those findings and those corrections back into the operations. So if you were to kind of look at the numbers in 2011, we were very reactive. We were generating 52,000 work orders annually, but as you can see here, only about 25% of that was planned maintenance of some form, either preventative or corrective maintenance as a result of doing PM. So that meant we were 75% reactive, and it was very much like a fireman mentality. You know, the bell would sound on a daily basis, staff would deploy, and they would go out and address the building interruption, the failed equipment. You know, and they would come back at the end of the day, and there would be celebration, and there would be excitement around basically fighting those fires. So I made a point very early on as we would have our shop meetings to talk to staff about how every great company that existed had a roadmap, and we needed to create a roadmap to not only look at how we would change that culture, but work in stretching those dollars and those resources that we had to be as proactive as possible. And we clearly, the path we were on was not sustainable because, as I said, it was very reactive. So the analogy I used with staff was about creating that roadmap and knowing that we were going to encounter obstacles and we needed to work together through those obstacles to make those improvements. So early on, we decided to focus in on these 4 strategic goals. We wanted to prolong the equipment life and reduce the renewal dollars we were using to fight fires and emergencies, and really keep those dollars reserved for planned projects. We also wanted to lower our operating costs within our operating budget. At that time was $11.3 million. And again, 75% of that was going towards reactive. So we wanted to shift that so that those dollars were better spent and we could basically prolong equipment life. And if we did that, if we targeted the larger systems, we knew we could also lower energy and utility costs. And then finally, in terms of our customers, we wanted to produce and deliver better customer service. And if we reduced equipment failures, minimized outages and unplanned interruptions, we knew we could make a positive impact to the Brown community. So how we did that? We, in 2011, and we spent the entire calendar year of 2011. So this was not a one-time series of meetings. This was across 2 fiscal years, 1 entire calendar year, where we involved and launched a project team consisting of 133 stakeholders that included building customers, liaisons out in these various building portfolios I talked about, the majority of our frontline staff, our supervisors, our management staff, directors, and we brought in the consultants. And by using the lean approach, we really focused on where we could basically increase value, reduce waste, and do it in a way where we respected everyone's opinion. So we knew we couldn't basically go out to 236 buildings, so we specifically targeted 30 representative buildings that made up those 8 building portfolios, and we looked at approximately 400 different asset types. And we started value streaming with our stakeholders and with our staff in efficiencies. So using the APA guidelines, we looked at maintenance service levels, and we knew we couldn't do 100% of PM equally, in all 8 of our building portfolios. So looking at the maintenance levels, we tiered it into a 4-tier approach, and with our stakeholders, they were very much part of this process. And in developing this, we actually created a 9th building portfolio specific to our power plant, central heat plant, and 9 heating hubs out on campus, and that became the 9th building portfolio. So when it was all said and done, if you look to the left side of your slide, of your screen, you'll see that we ranked the portfolios, and we used characteristics such as was the buildings or buildings in those portfolios mission critical? What were their individual NEV scores? What did the buildings house? What did it have a function for research? Were the buildings high energy users? Were the departments in those buildings regulated or accredited in any way? And how complex were those systems? So using a weighted score, we came up with these scores based for each building portfolio, and because a majority of our stakeholders were involved in the process, it was starting to having that dialogue with staff and with stakeholders about where we would invest more resources and what levels of preventative maintenance we would be launching in the future once we finished the planning exercise of putting together this strategy. So we worked on several meetings on identifying value and outcome, and what we just early on with our stakeholders, what we decided was the key categories where we could focus on. If we focused on the first 3 bars you see there in green, they would lead toward implementation and driving results in the remaining categories you see there in blue. So we said very early on with our stakeholders, we needed to do a better job of planning and organizing. We needed to do a better job of balancing workflow and prioritization, and obviously we wanted to improve communication and be as transparent as possible. We next worked with our trade staff to basically value stream problems, obstacles, and come up with basically not only where there were problems, but also where there were possible obstacles that we identified that we could solve. So we came up with over 180 problems and ideas to basically work on, which started getting us back into the dialogue of we were inefficient, and we kind of, both management and staff needed to recognize that, and we both, I think, really worked hard on this, not only to identify those inefficiencies, but also identify which of those 400 different asset types we would put PM dollars towards. So I took a commitment. We learned a lot. I think frontline staff had a lot of apprehension coming into this. You know, were we going to downsize at that time in 2010, 2011? We were actually 94 FTEs, and we had 10 positions frozen. They were concerned about you know, potentially outsourcing, potentially reducing staff, and not having overtime available to them. And it was really about that culture change of saying, first of all, we're not going to downsize. Second of all, we're really focused on spending overtime wisely. And wouldn't it be great if you knew in advance not only what you'd be working on tomorrow or today or next week, but also you could plan that overtime. So rather than getting a call in the middle of the night to come in on something that was failed, you'd be getting 3, 4, 5 days advance notification for overtime opportunities, and we would have planned work, planned overtime, and working through those mechanics really, I think, led to a lot of staff coming on board to the concept that this wasn't going to go away and that we really needed to change away from our inefficiencies. We're clearly more than 30% inefficient on most of our processes, and we needed to do a better job of that. So by the end of that year, we had identified 57,000 hours that we could reinvest back into the operations. And those 57,000 hours were basically equivalent to 27 FTEs if we recovered all those hours. So there was a lot of dialogue about which inefficiencies would we work on first, and which ones made the most sense in terms of us recapturing those hours and building upon that. So we broke down those 57 hours down into these 5 buckets you see here, and then we started basically on that mission of basically executing these, working on smaller groups on these inefficiencies to basically launch a variety of programs, which I'll talk about in a few slides ahead. In terms of the budget, in 2010, if we had done, or excuse me, in 2011 when we were working on the PM strategy, if we had done 100% PM equally across all 9, if you include a central heat plant, building portfolios, we would have needed over $12 million in 2011. If you recall, our budget at that time was 11.3. So, and that was for everything, including the 75% of that budget that was going towards reactive. So we clearly couldn't do 100%. So we right-sized it, again, using those APA guidelines, and our target for our PM program became $7.8 million approximately in terms of cost. So we knew we were going in this direction, and it was a 7-year plan, and we started basically implementing in 2012. So in terms of the timeline, the things we've worked on since then, in 2011 we worked on the PM strategy. Can you go to the next slide, please? Oh, so we have to talk about one very important thing. So since we're talking about money, our Vice President Steve Maruszewski had the opportunity to go before the University Resource Committee, and we did appropriate a one-time fund of $580,000 during the 2010-2011 process, which helped pay for these consultants and helped us work on the various inefficiency projects we identified as part of the PM strategy. Also during that time frame, that 3-year time frame between 2010 to 2012, we had 3 major building construction projects going on simultaneously. So we knew we were going to be adding on about a little over 300,000 square feet. We had, again, gotten incremental O&M money, which was annual funding, and that equated to about $400,000 that we were able to start putting into our reserves in preparation for the launch of the PM strategy. And then lastly, as I already talked about, we knew we had inefficiencies and we could recapture 57,000 hours of labor inefficiencies, which basically equaled out to about $2.5 million of PM, that of monies we were already spending that we could shift towards PMs if we recaptured those inefficiencies. So in terms of timeline, there's each one of these potentially represents a whole nother presentation, but in terms of timeline, in 2011 really focused on the strategy, and then in 2012 we finalized that strategy and we launched the communication plan to not only all the staff that were involved, but also other staff who were hearing about that over the course of 2011. And we finalized that, and we did a series of town halls, both internal and external, with the Brown community. We then worked on a 10-year staffing plan in 2012 to identify basically, once we unfroze positions, where we would reallocate those positions that could best help us drive better PM results. We worked very diligently on a training calendar and training plan targeted towards PM, and we began overhauling our CMMS software, which continued into 2013. And really, there's a lot we could talk about there, but it was adding priority codes that allowed us to do PM over routine maintenance and other things. We did hire a preventive maintenance manager. We hired 2 planner schedulers. We hired a couple of additional supervisors that lowered our staffing, our staff to supervisor ratios to where we thought were appropriate. So, and then in 2014, after doing an in-house pilot of data collection, we did a pilot with a third party. We took the goals from our PM strategy and started developing metrics tied to softwares specific to BAS, as well as using other software beyond just our CMMS, so that basically we could not only produce metrics that were basically tell us how well we were doing, but also be able to model those metrics into the future. We began working on a mobile application in 2015. We launched iPads to all our staff. We actually deployed a pilot on visual aids for our first responders and began phase 1 of a complete campus-wide data collection. Currently we're in phase 2 in 2016, and we've piloted and deployed our quality assurance, quality control component of this. So in terms of our journey, we've recaptured a little over 25% of those 57,000 hours. We're in year 4 of that journey. You can see here we're now we're doing more work, which is good, but we're also doing more targeted preventative and planned corrective maintenance, and our percentage, our journey has more than doubled in terms of where we are now at 52%, which means our reactive is going in the opposite direction, which is where ultimately we wanted to see it be under 30%. Our budget has really only grown, has not grown significantly, even though we've added 300,000 square feet. The budget has somewhat stayed the same, but that shift of monies and how we're spending that money, we're spending it a lot more strategically. And we have now 30 dedicated staff towards PMs and a database of 16,000 assets and growing. And you can see there 2019 where we're going in terms of the 7-year roadmap. We're seeing good things. We're getting a lot of positive feedback, and this hasn't gone away in terms of the lean approach was really, I think, what sold it for us with our staff and with our frontline supervisors and managers, because continuous quality improvement is just part of what we do here, and we've seen the benefit of that. So that's really our story right there. And you can see some of the team here. It's been very much a enjoyable process to work with all of them and collaborate with them.
That was great. Thank you, Paul. And thank you for those of you that have already typed in your questions. Please keep sending those in. We're going to have the Q&A right after Steve's section. So now I want to turn this session over to Steve, and he's going to teach us about Penn State's reliability-centered maintenance.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I'm going to get started by just giving a quick background on the challenges we have, but I think you'll quickly see that even though we're very different than Brown, large versus small, public versus private, the challenges are very similar and the path we followed is very similar. Penn State University, as you can see, 45,000 students at our University Park campus, 95,000 students at all locations. Rather large. Mostly what I'm going to talk about today is the University Park campus, however. Challenges in terms of volume and scale, you can see, are rather large. We're a large institution. Just looking at our building square footage, just at University Park alone, 24 million square feet. All campuses, 32 million. And we have a staff here at University Park of roughly 1,400 tech service and professional employees. 24 locations around the state, 2 power plants, our own water supply and filtration system, our own sewage treatment plant, and 4 substations serving our campus. We did an assessment several years ago and also established some goals, a little different than the way Brown approached it. We used the Facility Condition Need Index to establish target goals for maintaining our facilities. And this is basically our deferred and or backlog divided by the cost of renewal or replacement. And you can see we're trying to hold student space and icons at a higher standard, as well as utility spaces at a higher standard. And we have a portfolio that is roughly falling 30% short of achieving our goals, and we have a current deferred renewal backlog somewhere around $1.7 to $2 billion. To add to our challenges, just like Brown, our facilities are aging. 68% of our portfolio at University Park is 25% or 25 years or older in terms of not being renewed. Our campuses are a little bit newer, but not by a whole lot. To add to the challenge is the funding challenge, as we all struggle through. That bottom blue line shows the targeted amount to maintain our facilities at roughly the same condition they're in. And as Kevin mentioned earlier on, we use a combination of strategies. Our stewardship funding, which is our major maintenance or annual funding, is represented by the blue portion of the bar, is what we get every year, and then we supplement it with capital money to get at the shortfall to keep our backlog from increasing. And as you can see, even with that combination, we continue to fall below the targeted line, and we have concerns going into the next capital plan that we'll be able to even sustain what we've been able to sustain to date. So that challenge is also rather large. Just because I like to whine, I want to add to the challenge a little more. Over the past 10 years, we've lost roughly 50% in buying power through either budget reductions, inflation in the construction market, and the cumulative impact is really significant. So like every other institution, we've had to get better at doing more with less. But this kind of shows how much better we've had to get in terms of covering the reduction in money we have available for our materials. So summary of the challenges: they're significant, they're not going away. There's national pressure on affordability. This past year we had no tuition increase, which added another burden. Permanent stewardship funding gets harder. Capital funding doesn't fully address the gap. In fact, in some ways it addresses items that aren't necessarily priorities, so it doesn't go all toward our priority deferred maintenance. Our annual buying power continues to go down, so we need to make the best possible use of the existing funding. So we can't afford to be in the reactive maintenance business moving forward. So what we're trying to do here at Penn State is establish a path toward reliability-focused maintenance. We've been on the preventive maintenance path for about 15 years, and not that we've perfected it, but we feel like it's time to step up to the next round. We've seen the benefit of preventative, and we think reliability-centered maintenance will be even more beneficial. Starting with changing the culture. We've had a culture for decades of rewarding the cowboys, the heroes that come in and fix things that break. But we don't really reward the folks who do it day in, day out, make sure things don't break. And we really haven't found a successful way to do this other than to pat people on the back on a routine basis. But somehow we need to change this culture. In fact, I've seen instances here where we've rewarded somebody for fixing something that they should have maintained on a routine basis. So, in fact, we rewarded them for their failure. And I think that happens more often than we realize. So we're starting with a real push to change what we think is important. Why make the shift? We've had a couple instances where we can point very directly to the actual cost for not doing the preventative and predictive. One most recently, we had two major air handlers side-by-side fail. And as we looked through our data, all the signs were there. We knew about it. We didn't put the pieces together, and the costs were significant. 2 months downtime for one, 6 months downtime for another, more than $500,000 in direct costs. The unit lost over $1 million in research opportunities, and these fixes probably could have been avoided for less than $50,000. And I think this happens at a smaller scale fairly routinely on some of our campuses. You've probably seen these slides before, and the next two slides basically tell the same story. The sooner you get to something, the sooner you detect the potential failure, the lower the cost to repair. And the cost to repair, as I mentioned on the previous slide, is only a very small fraction of the total cost to the institution due to the failure, not to mention the reputational cost on your customer base. This is just another curve that sort of shows it in a different format. There is, and we do use one of the methodologies, a run-to-failure methodology, and we use this on buildings that we're planning to totally renew. But if you're not careful, this one can also bite you. So it's not it's not often a very effective methodology at institutions of higher education. I'm in the middle of one right now, animal room facility. The building's scheduled to start the renewal in 2 years, and the animal rooms are failing left and right as we speak, and by the time I'm done, I'll probably rebuild it one piece at a time, as opposed to having convinced them to relocate the animals and postpone it indefinitely. One of the challenges we have is funding this transition. As you go from preventive or from reactive to more preventive and then reliability based, you have sort of a double whammy, because you still have the reactive that needs to be addressed along the way while you're spinning up your preventive and your reliability based processes. So there's a little additional cost. The concern here is that everybody's on board with the additional costs. You can see our costs when compared to our peers is a little higher, and that's because we're trying to make this transition. If seen by or taken out of context by the wrong people, it could be seen as our budgets are fat and we need to be cut, which would then immediately undermine the process. Preventive maintenance is a significant portion of our budget, and this shows our staffing as well. Our staffing is a little higher than our peers at the moment, and that's again because we've created both the reactive and the preventive operating in parallel. Next slide, Kevin. As I said, our focus on preventive, you can see we invest more money in our preventive maintenance than all of our peers by a considerable amount, and we've been doing this for quite a while. One of the first things we had to do to head toward a reliability-centered maintenance is to reorganize in a manner that would allow the preventive and reliability-centered maintenance programs to grow while the reactive programs reduced. And so we created organizational chart where you can shift from one side to the other rather quickly. So as our programs advance, we're moving out of the reactive business into the preventive business very quickly and easily. These are just a list of several of our preventive maintenance programs. I'm sure most of you have seen similar programs at your institutions. Another thing we had to do, similar to Brown, we had to upgrade our CMMS system to more accurately reflect our assets. So we have a very aggressive program to identify all of our assets, and they're growing exponentially. We had to strengthen our planning and scheduling process, so we added planners in major disciplines so that more of our work could be job kitted and have materials at the site to enhance the wrench time of each one of our techs. We also had to develop new metrics. Some of the metrics that we were utilizing were actually inadvertently creating the wrong behaviors. So we now have developed a better metrics process. We've partnered with a company called Propel, and we have metrics now that tie our work all the way up through the university strategic plan, which is a really interesting and innovative way, and it's really changing the behavior of our employees. In order to find out where we were when we started on this change, we did a baseline wrench study, and you can see by these numbers, they seem really low, but as I understand it, it's pretty reflective of the general industry. We had some crews that were essentially getting 18% of their time as wrench time. The rest of it was spent chasing materials, chasing tools, sitting in meetings. So our goal is to take roughly 3 hours of average wrench time up to 5, and it'll be significant. So the ultimate goal is to expand the capacity, and we think there's anywhere from 3 to 6 million in wrench time, reduce the reactive maintenance to less than 20%, which should ultimately also reduce the ancillary damage that occurs on our campuses, reduce the operating cost total cost per square foot, significantly improve overall reliability, which should dramatically increase customer satisfaction.
Great, thank you, Steve. Thank you again. That portion was great there. Everyone, please continue to send in your questions, and thank you for those that have already have submitted again. So I know that we threw a lot of information at you today. What we wanted to do is provide you with 3 executive takeaways from each of the 2 sections of the presentation. So from Paul's, if we start off with Paul's section, the strategic plan, that's your starting place. So you don't want to head into this effort blindly. But the plan is only going to work if you have that buy-in both top-down and bottom-up. Your team needs to be part of the process in developing the solutions. Lastly, you need metrics to track this. To provide you with a quote from Lord Kelvin, if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. Metrics must be established and then monitored to ensure that the goals are being met. From Steve's session, funding is always going to be constrained or in danger, and then making the best use of what we have, that's critical. That's where the planning and the prevention come in. They're going to be key into maximizing that available funding. So similar to Paul's section, the culture, that's also an important component where you need to have that shift from valuing the extreme, those cowboys, to valuing the routine, the folks that are doing all that PM. So I'd like to thank both Paul and Steve once again. That's going to wrap up the content for today's session. If you do have any additional questions, please feel free to continue typing them in right now. And as you're typing those in, I did want to let you know that you'll be receiving a post-webinar survey at the conclusion of the session. That survey is designed not only to get your thoughts on the content of today's presentation, but also to get a sense for the challenges that you're facing on campus, and then with that in mind, what future topics you'd like to hear from Sightlines at future events such as this. I also want to make sure that we're encouraging you to also visit our Insights page, so you'll be able to stay current with trends and latest best practices, innovative solutions that we're sharing, such as sessions like this. That Insights is going to be your resource to easily access industry knowledge from both the Sightline staff as well as our member institutions. There's blog posts, articles, additional webinar recordings where you'll find this session, as well as more information on upcoming events and sessions. Then you'll also have the opportunity to sign up for the monthly newsletter. So make sure you're checking in time from time, and you'll be able to get some information there. So the first question that we have here is one for Paul, and that is, what was the most difficult part in getting the buy-in from the staff, and then how did you address that?
I would say probably the most difficult piece was getting staff to look at things strategically, and that's sometimes difficult to do when you're traveling down the road 100 miles per hour and you're getting interruptions, phone calls, and you're dealing with very tactical day-to-day type requests. So from my vantage point, it was getting staff to think that this was a long-term journey. We weren't going to turn the ship overnight, nor were we asking anyone to create those miracles. What we wanted staff to do was basically to look at this where we could be from an operational standpoint and from a resource allocation standpoint in a better position if we all got on that road and traveled that journey together. So getting the staff to look at things strategically while still expecting them to produce on a day-to-day basis was a challenge. But ultimately we overcame that challenge, and I'm glad we had so much collaboration. One of the things the staff here, even though it's a union environment, they are great in sharing ideas, possible solutions, things they see, and they don't hesitate to bring those forward. The big thing is capturing that, not necessarily worrying about the tone or the delivery, but capturing the content so that we could basically incorporate that into our strategy. So that was, that was great to do.
Great, great. Thank you, Paul. Next question we have is for Steve. And the question is, has this plan been implemented at any of the additional branch campuses that fall under Penn State's umbrella? Then if it has been, or if you're going to, are you going to adjust it because it's a different scale?
So the quick answer to that is no. The way we manage our maintenance at our remote locations, they're under the control of the local chancellor. And so we don't have necessarily as much control over the day-to-day. Our future is to look at that more closely so that we have more of a Penn State brand at all locations, but at the moment, no. And second part of that is absolutely it would have to be modified because they operate pretty much with a skeletal staff, and frankly we'd have to bring staff from probably either University Park or at least team up staff in campuses that have proximate locations. But they're so minor, they have such a minor staff that it would definitely have to be scaled.
Gotcha. Great, thank you, Steve. Our next question is for Paul. This was kind of had been put in closer to the beginning, and the question was about, you had mentioned there were 2 consulting firms that you had brought in. They were asking who were those consulting firms?
Sure. We used Studio Jade out of the Delaware Mid-Atlantic region to help us with our PM strategy, engineering, and modeling exercise, and go out and shadow staff and supervisors. And then we also used Haley and Ulrich for our Lean Six Sigma approach to identify waste and value, and then help us with quantifying those hours that we could recapture back into the operations.
Thank you, Paul. Another question for you, Paul, was they were asking, there was a portion of the presentation where it mentioned that you had created visual aids and you were deploying visual aids. The question was, what were those visual aids that you were utilizing?
So the visual aids were really came out of our design standards. I didn't talk a lot about this, but early on we didn't have a very good O&M delivery from our project group to our operations group. So one of the things we did early on was work on our design standards to develop basically turnover, the right amount of turnover information that we wanted to target. So if you recall, we went out and we basically canvassed 30 representative buildings, looked at 400 different asset types. Ultimately, when we developed, finalized the PM strategy, we really focused on 180 of the 400 possible asset types that were out on campus to really be the core of our preventive maintenance strategy. So when doing that, one thing came out of our working sessions was that first responders really at that time they did not have mobile applications. So we wanted to basically work on visual aids that, one, they could basically find in the field, things such as riser diagram, zone color drawings, very large equipment schematics that we could put on certain pieces of equipment that explained how that piece of equipment was connected to the bigger system, as well as have electronically this information available so that anyone could log in from any workstation on campus to find descriptive manuals and access to as-built information. So we started deploying that first statically in the field, and we also electronically digitized all that so that when we rolled out the iPads, they could view that same content from their iPad and mobile device. So we've done this for all new buildings here on campus since 2000 and well, we've done it in one variation or another since really 2013, but we standardized on what those visual aids were sometime in 2014 and started working on that and piloted that in 2015. And we've been making that as part of our practice to go back to existing buildings that are critical buildings to implement more of that so that we target not only the new buildings that are coming online, but also some of the critical buildings that were already in existence that we're going back to add those visual aids.
Thank you. Next question we have here is for Steve. The question was, can we hear a few metrics that you use to evaluate your work, and an example of one that incentivized the wrong behavior?
So a couple, I'm just going to go off the top of my head. One of the ones that we found that was didn't incentivize the right behavior was turnaround time on designs. If design really defines the bulk of your long-term costs, it didn't make any sense to really rush it. Now, there's always a desire to get them done in an expedient amount of time, but rushing the front end of the process results in costs for the lifetime of the building. So that was one. That was one that it was a disincentive. I'd have to think about a few others. Some of the ones that we're finding intriguing are around our stores operation. We have remote stores throughout our campus and our area shops, and we're finding that we have materials that have not turned over in 2 years, and we're also finding that we're having materials that are always out of stock. And we didn't always have the right metrics to keep up with these kinds of things, but they make a tremendous difference in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. So not always in the right place. The areas we were looking weren't always in the right place. Number of work orders was seen as an exciting thing. How many work orders completed, and we found that people were manipulating the system. You set a metric, and sooner or later somebody hits it, so you've got to pay attention to how they hit it. And now it's more along the lines of how few work orders do you have at any one point in time in your queue, because that means it's all cleaned up. You're not working on, things aren't sitting in the system idle, and therefore we're not looking at them for the 100th time. We spent a fair amount of time cleaning everything up. So I'm not sure, I could probably go on. I can't think of any more off the top of my head. But there were several that just kind of, cost per work order was another one. That was another metric. This is probably the most important one. Seen as a good thing if it didn't cost as much to do a work order, and what was inadvertently happening is the painting was getting done and the mechanical equipment was being put in backlog. So you just have to be careful that you have metrics that almost check your metrics, because the metric you define might not really be what you're after.
Great, thank you, Steve. The next question, this is for both campuses, and that is, which CMMS systems are you using, and then what upgrades did you need to make to your CMMS system? Maybe Paul, you want to start?
Sure. So we're using a product called Famous. We've customized that. So we have in-house Famous software designers here at Brown. So we had been, when I got here, we had been kind of following the, the organizational software updates and keeping it very basically boilerplate to the Famous product. Shortly after going through the preventive maintenance strategy, when we started going into implementation, we realized we really needed to customize it. So ever since 2012, 2012 and 2013 were heavy emphasis on redesigning Famous so that we could basically make it a Brown, specific to what we wanted it to do.
At Penn State, I'm sorry, Paul. At Penn State, we're using Maximo, and we went from an older version, which was a local-based version, to a web-based version, and it essentially was a complete change out of the entire CMMS by the time we were done. And there's so many important, Maximo has so many strengths that you've got to be careful you don't overuse it, because it's not all, you don't need it all, so you have to find that right balance point. Probably the most important thing I think that we found is maintaining the log. As the technicians do their work and or reach starting points, that's become another one of our metrics. How many of the logs are up to date, and that's been an incredible efficiency improvement just that small piece.
Great, great, thank you. Our next question is for Paul, and they were asking if you could tell them about the QA/QC program.
Sure, it's actually, so we go through basically a work verification process that then basically allows us to do either QA or QC. So for work orders that are generated from our customer base out in the field, external customers, we'll do a quality assurance review. Our supervisors will go out and basically have interaction with our customers, and we'll basically bring back opportunities where we see basically things that we can improve on processes, and likewise we do that on the preventative maintenance and planned maintenance side for the QC part of that. So what at the end of the day, what we're really targeting is looking to see if there's potentially any processes where we can improve on that allow us basically to reinvest back into the operation. So that could be anything from different training, better access to tools and materials, looking at how our standard operating procedures basically may need to differ or be edited, upgraded, and anything that will help us basically deliver better daily service not only to our customers but also extend the life of that equipment. So it really goes either the road of, if I was to kind of draw it on a chart, it would be work verification, then QA, or work verification, then QC. And that's led by our supervisors. We are also looking at potentially bringing in a third party, and we're having dialogue now about having maybe some additional resources external to Brown that could help us take this to the next level.
Great, great. Thank you, Paul. So we're wrapping up here. We're getting to our 2 o'clock, kind of ending that window. So I do want to do one more question. And then any questions that we didn't get to, what we'll do is we'll work on getting those answers from Steve and Paul for you, and then we'll work on making those available. So the last question that we wanted to wrap up with here is for both organizations, if you have a facilities asset management group, where do they fit in the overall picture regarding these efforts? Are they directing the planning and replacement schedules, or are they conducting analysis for capital reinvestment targets?
I'll start, Paul. So they're basically doing both. We have a group we call the Work Control Center, which I have straddling all other groups, including our utilities operation. And they basically do the planning, scheduling, estimating, job kitting, and also the facility analysis, and ultimately feed into the renewal capital plan. They also manage the major maintenance and building maintenance budget.
So here at Brown, we have a preventative maintenance team, which consists of 2 planner schedulers and a PM manager. They report to me. From an operations standpoint, I represent, I'm one of the principals on the renewal committee, myself and several other directors, and the VP and AVP, and we funnel and communicate up issues to make sure we have renewal funding appropriately targeted towards the various categories, and put together those plans for execution for our project team.
Great, great. Thank you again, Steve and Paul. So that's where we're going to stop today. Any questions that we didn't get to, we will work to get you answers for those. Please, additionally, if any additional questions pop up moving forward, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via our website, contacting us directly at insights@sightlines.com for anything following up from today's call. Thank you again, and everyone have a great day.